In Revenge, you talk about how Meghan's lack of knowledge about British history meant she could not understand that Diana had won the public's affection.
She was warned before she married what the nature of being Harry's wife and part of the royal family would be, and the nature of how she ignored all that advice for two reasons. One is she really did believe she could do what she wanted. And secondly, I don't believe she ever intended to stay. She always intended to take the title, take the connections and get back to California.
Harry and Meghan the other side, smiling and all the rest of it.
She wanted wealth and she wanted fame. And there's no doubt she targeted Harry.
See, Meghan loves money. Meghan's very commercial. She doesn't want to be poor. And then having got all that, she then saw how she needed a consort, a husband who's going to take her to the next stage. And she was on a manhunt, there's no doubt. I mean, there's nothing wrong with being on a manhunt. There are women hunts too, but I mean, she was determined.
Is that Meghan has got no real income anymore. She's finished.
Right.
The Netflix series is over. There's no great podcast. They don't generate any money. And I don't see where she is going from here. I think she has a major problem.
At some point, a carefully built image starts to fall apart. And according to Tom Bauer, that moment is already here. What once looked controlled, polished, and consistent is now starting to slip, and people are beginning to notice it more and more. For years, Meghan Markle shaped a narrative that defined how the public saw her. A story built around struggle, conflict with the royal family, emotional pressure, and being misunderstood. It was repeated, it was clear, and it worked. But now Bauer, known for backing his claims with evidence, is challenging that version directly. He says the facts tell a different story, and they're no longer staying in the background. His latest claims don't just point out small contradictions, they go much deeper than that. He describes a full system behind it all, a method built on reshaping the past, using sympathy as a tool, and adjusting facts until they match the version of events being presented.
To suit Meghan's agenda, and Meghan's living with Meghan is very different than living with Kate and William. Meghan has a completely different attitude, and I think California has a different attitude. So I think we're now seeing a different Harry, and to his misfortune, it's not a Harry that appeals to the same sort of people in the same numbers as previously.
And the details he brings up, they hit hard. According to him, Meghan didn't just stretch the truth. She rebuilt it in her favor. He claims royal connections were turned into opportunity, childhood stories were enhanced, timelines were shifted around, and certain people who once played key roles were quietly left out.
I think there was that, but I've got to tell you, my research for my new book, the number of times she was warned before she married what the nature of being Harry's wife and part of the royal family would be, and the nature of how she ignored all that advice for two reasons. One is she really did believe she could do what she wanted.
Every time things went wrong, the narrative flipped back to her being the one hurt by it all. Now things are changing. The public isn't reacting the same way anymore, and fewer people are buying into the image that once worked so well. Bauer describes this as the breaking point, where everything starts to fall apart. The brand, the storyline, the carefully built image, all of it starts slipping once cracks show.
That was very critical because at that moment last year, she was about to promote her Netflix series and didn't want to firstly be seen with Harry, and secondly didn't want to go somewhere where she'd appear cheap.
Because once that mask drops, it doesn't just snap back into place. He believes the truth is starting to unravel piece by piece, and more is coming out into the open. And today, we're diving into exactly what he's been revealing. Tom Bauer isn't just another voice throwing opinions around from the outside. He's built a name over decades as someone powerful figures take seriously, and sometimes even fear. He's known for going where others won't, speaking to people who stayed quiet for years, and calling out behavior at the highest levels without holding back. His books about prime ministers, billionaires, and royalty have completely torn apart carefully built PR images. And here's the part people keep overlooking. Meghan and Harry never took him to court. Not even once. For a couple known to push legal action over headlines, jokes, opinions, tweets, and even satire, that silence says a lot. So why stay quiet when it comes to Bauer? Simple, because he backs everything up. He talks to real people, digs deep, and keeps records of it all. They likely hoped people would move on and forget. But Bauer doesn't forget anything. He keeps proof, And that changes everything.
To create her own brand and image in the whole Netflix series of lifestyle series. She was told she had to give up being the Wicked Witch in terms of the royal family. She should put that all behind her and not mention them, because people want to see her, not all the time complaining. She couldn't resist, because in the end, one of Meghan's many deficiencies is she has nothing to say. There's no originality.
What makes him different is his approach. He doesn't come in loud or emotional, and he's not trying to shock people just for attention. His strength is in staying calm, direct, and focused on facts. When he challenges a claim, he brings evidence with him: documents, timelines, witnesses, and accounts from insiders who were actually there.
She is desperate to be seen.
Yeah.
And that's why she turned up. So I think she has a major problem, financially and professionally. And I think that Harry has a problem.
That's why his latest statements land so hard. Critics have spoken before, but this feels different. It's not random talk, it's not guesses, and it's not internet noise. It comes across as confirmation. According to Bauer, things really started to fall apart when Meghan moved to profit from the Queen's private nickname. He describes this as one of the most questionable decisions Meghan and Harry have made.
In Meghan's mind, she is Diana.
Yes.
I mean, Diana Spencer is Meghan Spencer. And that was all part of her imagination, that somehow she could inherit the glow of her dead mother-in-law. So I think that was another reason for Charles to say no.
And the reaction from the public shows why. It wasn't seen as a simple mistake. It looked planned out. Bauer claims that the domain name tied to Lilibet was secured even before the Queen was officially told about the birth of their daughter. That name wasn't just something casual. Lilibet had deep personal meaning. It came from the Queen's childhood and was only used by a very small, trusted circle, including her parents and her husband. It carried emotional weight and history. But instead of keeping it private, it was turned into something more public-facing. Bauer points out that when Harry said he had asked the Queen for permission, the palace stepped in and quietly clarified the situation to the BBC. He didn't ask, he made the decision and put it out there. And that move didn't go over quietly. Reports say the Queen was seriously upset, and when the palace publicly pushed back against Harry's version of events, something they almost never do, it sent a clear signal. That kind of response doesn't happen without strong reason. When Harry reportedly tried to pressure the BBC into changing their story with legal threats, the palace still stood firm. They made it clear, don't apologize because what was said was accurate. This wasn't brushed off as confusion or poor communication. It was seen as a calculated step that revealed how Meghan and Harry were approaching the monarchy, not just as tradition, but as something that could be used to build a brand. And according to Bauer, this moment marked the start of a serious drop in their credibility.
And she wanted the cover and control the content, and they had a huge argument. And that meant that he was really finished with her. He'd had enough of her prima donna behavior, and that's why he's dumped her. But also, I mean, from his point of view, what does she now bring? There isn't anything original. There's no great sales point there. And I think you've got to look at something else. You mentioned at the beginning the Sam Kashner.
Once that trust started slipping, it didn't stop. If there's one area Bauer highlights as a major example of Meghan reshaping her story, it's her relationship with her father. And not just because it's emotional, but because, as he presents it, the details don't line up with the public version.
In California, I can actually sue to see them, but I don't want to do that. And the other thing is, I've done nothing wrong. There's nothing that points to me says I'm a bad guy. As a matter of fact, I'm a really loving father, and she knows that. And there's no excuse for her to treat me this way. No excuse to treat the king that way as well.
Bauer claims Meghan painted a picture of a difficult, almost isolated childhood, talking about simple meals, budget living, being on her own, and lacking support. It created a powerful image, something that felt real and emotional. But according to his research, that version leaves out key facts. He points to Thomas Markle funding private education, covering high-end activities like ballet and photography classes, and providing a lifestyle that many families couldn't afford.
And she gets into one of the best university colleges of America, Northwestern, because of her education and background. So by no means anything other than a happy childhood, although a broken family.
He was present, picking her up from school, driving her to auditions, supporting her ambitions, paying for her car and university, and helping open doors along the way. Then there's the story about the Procter & Gamble commercial, often described as a defining moment in Meghan's early activism. Bauer says when he looked into it, there was no clear record to support the story as it's been told. No confirmed letter, no documented response, nothing solid showing it happened in that exact way. Even her father reportedly said he never sent such a letter himself. That raises questions that haven't fully been answered. According to Bauer, the shift came later. As Meghan's public image evolved, her father's role in her life seemed to fade from the narrative.
And of course, they're not allowed to come to the dinner after the wedding. I mean, people whom he'd known for years. And even at the wedding of Tommy and Skip in Jamaica, one of the parents who was there told me that Meghan had behaved appallingly. They just couldn't understand why Harry was going out with her. She didn't like the food, she didn't like them.
The way he was described changed, the tone shifted, and the man who once appeared central became more distant in the story. Bauer suggests that, intentionally or not, the past was reshaped, turning the focus toward independence and struggle, rather than support and opportunity. This wasn't just confusion or distance between people. Bauer frames it as something much more calculated: branding. Tom Bauer points to the Oprah interview as the exact moment where everything started to crack, and he doesn't say that lightly. It was a massive global event, carefully staged, perfectly lit, and designed to present Meghan and Harry as victims standing up against a harsh system. But according to Bauer, that image didn't hold up for long. The second people started checking the details, things began to fall apart fast. He highlights what he describes as 17 clear inaccuracies from that interview, not small mix-ups or forgotten details, but direct contradictions. One of the biggest claims was Meghan saying she and Harry were secretly married 3 days before the official royal wedding. But Bauer points straight to the timeline, showing it couldn't have happened. Even the Archbishop confirmed there was no private ceremony before the public one. No early vows, no hidden wedding in the background, just a story that didn't match reality. Then came the sensitive claim about a senior royal questioning Archie's skin color. Bauer argues that this was presented in a way that linked it to Archie not receiving a royal title, making it seem connected. But according to him, those two things had nothing to do with each other. The rules around royal titles were already established long before Meghan entered the picture.
Meghan didn't like the surname Mountbatten Windsor. If you remember, in her first lifestyle series with Meghan with Them Forever, she says to Carling that her surname isn't Markle but Sussex.
Mm-hmm.
And she was desperate to get it. She said, we never had a proper surname. And of course they did.
Archie's status followed those rules, not anything related to race, at least based on how Bauer explains it. There was also the emotional claim that Meghan wasn't given support when she needed it most. But Bauer says internal records told a different story. He points to logs showing she had access to staff, medical professionals, and support systems throughout that time. That contrast between what was said publicly and what was reportedly documented raised even more questions. For Bauer, the Oprah interview didn't end up exposing the royal family the way it was intended. It shifted the spotlight back onto Meghan instead. And according to him, the real turning point actually started earlier, during the Australia tour. On the surface, that tour looked like a huge success. Crowds were cheering, headlines were glowing, and every photo looked flawless. But behind closed doors, Bauer says the atmosphere was completely different. After speaking with staff involved in the trip, he describes a much more tense situation. According to multiple accounts, Meghan approached the tour more like a celebrity expecting special treatment rather than someone representing the monarchy.
I do think that the Australian trip turned their head in a crazy way, although she behaved appallingly during the trip. Yeah. But in Harry's view, this was his mother all over again. What Meghan never really understood, probably not even now, is that when she was cheered as a working royal,
There were claims of sudden outbursts, sharp exchanges with aides, last-minute demands, and even an incident that left staff shocked, the so-called tea-throwing moment that quickly became one of the most talked-about stories from behind the scenes. But Bauer says the real issue went deeper than behavior. It was psychological. He claims Meghan started to believe those massive crowds were there just for her, not for the institution, not for the role, but for her alone. In that mindset, she began to see herself on the level of Diana, iconic, untouchable, and meant to be at the very center of attention.
Meghan believed she was as important to the monarchy as Princess Diana, you write in the book, and her visit to Australia in October 2018 only boosted that view. The more Harry drew parallels with his mother, and the more Meghan must have been convinced of her importance to the monarchy. Do you still think she's that delusional?
But then reality hit, and it wasn't something she liked. No matter what, she would always stand behind William and Catherine in the royal order. Not because of race, not because of personal conflict, but because of hierarchy, a system that had been in place for generations, structured long before she ever entered that world. And according to Bauer, that realization didn't sit well at all. He says that's when everything started shifting. Meghan didn't want to play a secondary role, didn't want to stand in the background, and definitely didn't want to be compared to Catherine, whose public image came across as natural and widely accepted. That contrast, Bauer suggests, made things even more tense. According to him, this is where the long-term exit plan quietly began, way before the Netflix deals, before the Oprah interview, before the emotional headlines and public accusations. This was the point where Meghan reportedly recognized that royal life wouldn't revolve around her, and from there, the direction started to change fast. Bauer also points to what he describes as one of the most unexpected moments, something that didn't happen in front of cameras, but behind the scenes. While the world was watching the Queen's funeral and hoping for some kind of healing between the brothers, he claims a completely different reality was already in motion.
And what I really thought at the end of it as well was this, which I think is a very, very pertinent point. When they came across for the Queen's funeral, and there was that amazing scene outside the castle of meeting the well-wishers in the walk, there was always talk of reconciliation. Mm-hmm. Charles and William and Kate go one side, Harry and Meghan the other side, smiling and all the rest of it. But at that time, William didn't know that Harry and Meghan had already recorded their poison for Netflix. It was already edited. All the stuff that we heard today about Charles lying, about William screaming and shouting, was in the can, was being edited, and they duplicitly did not reveal what they were going.
According to Bauer, Harry and Meghan had already filmed, edited, and finalized major parts of their Netflix series, including strong criticisms, before those public appearances even happened. So when Harry and Meghan stood next to William and Catherine outside Windsor Castle, the public saw a moment of unity, grief, and possible reconciliation. But Bauer claims there was something hidden beneath that image. He says William, and everyone else, had no idea that the same couple beside him had already recorded hours of serious accusations, ready to be released to the world. And at the same time, those recordings reportedly included personal accusations aimed at the very people he was standing beside in grief.
That's what she used as a weapon at the time. So there were quite a few things about her personal life. I'll work them into another book, I think.
Bauer describes this as something far from accidental. He frames it as cold, deliberate, and carefully planned. Harry was out there shaking hands, meeting supporters, appearing respectful. All while, according to Bauer, his own recorded statements were already set to go public. Statements where he claimed Charles lied, where he said William screamed, and where he blamed the monarchy for damaging his mental health. That contrast, Bauer argues, wasn't confusion. It was strategy. He even claims this wasn't the first time something like this happened. Bauer says Harry acted in a similar way during Prince Philip's funeral, presenting calm on the outside while preparing to release more criticism behind the scenes. But this time, it hit harder, because during the Netflix situation, it wasn't just about criticism, it was happening during a period of mourning, while publicly signaling peace. That's what made it stand out so much. Bauer's conclusion is sharp and direct. He doesn't describe this as emotional reaction or pain. He calls it calculated behavior. In his view, this wasn't about being hurt. It was about playing two sides at once. He also highlights what he sees as a repeating pattern in Meghan's public image: constant reinvention, new angles, new narratives, carefully chosen symbolism, all shaped to present a certain identity.
Because when she phoned up the two senators to campaign for women's maternity pay, she said, "Hello, this is Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex."
Yeah,
I mean, she
yeah.
plays the royal card the whole time. So I don't think that would play well in the election for Congress or even the Senate. So I think they've got to realign their image. I mean, I think in any case, they're burning out their royal status pretty fast now.
And according to Bauer, this isn't just natural growth. He suggests it's something much more intentional, almost like building a character piece by piece. He claims that long before people started making comparisons, Meghan was already drawing inspiration from Princess Diana. From the fashion choices to the jewelry, from the body language to the emotional tone, even down to the misunderstood woman narrative, Bauer says the similarities weren't sluchini, they were deliberate echoes of Diana's legacy. But then comes one of the more surprising claims. Bauer alleges that Meghan and Harry once approached Earl Spencer, Diana's brother, with a request to use the Spencer surname, not just as a tribute, but as their official family identity. According to Bauer, Meghan was aiming for something bigger, a direct connection to Diana's legacy, stepping away from the Windsor name completely. He says Meghan wasn't comfortable with Mountbatten Windsor, feeling it didn't represent her children the way she wanted. Instead, Spencer carried a different kind of weight: history, recognition, emotion, and global impact. But the response was firm. Charles Spencer reportedly refused right away. Bauer interprets that refusal as more than just a no. He sees it as a clear boundary being set. According to accounts he references, there were concerns about tying the Spencer name to future controversies and doubts from some insiders about how stable the marriage would be long-term. This wasn't really about identity. Bauer frames it as something much more strategic.
Whereas Meghan always has to fight for a place. She has to fight for the spotlight. She has to fight to be seen, and being seen is critical to her. And, she can't, if there's another shooting, she can't fly there as she did.
Image. A carefully built persona meant to reflect Diana's spotlight, but without the same foundation that made Diana respected: humility, empathy, and real public service. And in Bauer's view, those comparisons didn't come off as flattering. They felt uncomfortable to watch. He makes it clear that what's happening now didn't explode overnight. It built up slowly, right in front of everyone. Years of high-profile interviews, emotional storytelling, polished photo ops, and repeated victim narratives created a pattern. But then something shifted, something Meghan didn't seem to expect at all. People started checking the details. According to Bauer, Hollywood was the first place where things began to cool down. Quietly, behind the scenes, producers, publicists, and studios started creating distance. Not loudly, not dramatically, just stepping back. He explains they didn't want to risk connections with the royal family or get pulled into ongoing controversy. Invitations became less frequent, partnerships slowed down, and deals stopped moving forward. Then the media tone began to change. Publications that once praised Meghan started asking tougher questions. Outlets like Vanity Fair, The Cut, and The Hollywood Reporter began shifting away from repeating her narrative without verification. Even platforms that were once supportive became more cautious, focusing on facts instead of headlines. The business side took hits too. Spotify ended its podcast deal and didn't hold back in its public response. Netflix reportedly scaled down future plans. Archie Wells' reported impact numbers dropped, raising more eyebrows. And public opinion? It followed the same direction. In the United States, approval ratings fell sharply. In the UK, they reached some of the lowest levels recorded. Even in Australia, a place Meghan once seemed to connect with strongly, public sentiment turned more critical. Bauer argues this didn't happen because of racism, jealousy, or some coordinated effort behind the scenes. In his view, it came down to something much simpler. People started recognizing a pattern: stories that didn't fully line up, details that shifted over time, strong emotional appeals used as protection, and responsibility often placed everywhere else except on the person telling the story. Meghan and Harry didn't lose public support all at once. Bauer describes it as a slow breakdown, happening step by step.
So I think they've got a real identity crisis, which will be resolved in the next few months, one way or another. And I don't think it can be to the good. But the point about it is, you see, they're notorious.
Each new inconsistency, each new claim that didn't fully line up, chipped away at the image they had built. And every time Bauer brought forward something people hadn't seen before, it added more pressure. According to him, what we're seeing now isn't the beginning. It's the final phase, and it's picking up speed. After years of digging, interviews, documents, insider accounts, and quiet conversations happening behind palace doors, Bauer saves his strongest conclusion for last, and it hits hard. He says Meghan has reached a point where no new narrative can fix what's already out there. Not another interview, not a rebrand, not a lifestyle project, and not even another emotional explanation about being misunderstood. In his view, the public has already seen too much. The inconsistencies stand out, the contradictions keep repeating, and the overall picture is becoming harder to ignore. Bauer argues the issue isn't just about making mistakes, it's about patterns. The same moves happening again and again, reshaping past events, shifting responsibility, stepping into the victim role when challenged, and pushing back on anyone who questions the story being told. He describes what's happening now as predictable, not surprising. Media opportunities are slowing down, major deals aren't as strong as before, and connections to the royal institution appear fully broken. Hollywood is creating distance, public sympathy is fading, and the narrative that once worked, the idea of being wronged, isn't landing the same way anymore. But Bauer's final point goes even deeper. He says the biggest challenge isn't coming from the public, the press, the palace, or even Harry. According to him, the real issue is the foundation itself. He argues that Meghan built a global image around a version of herself that can't hold up when closely examined. And once that happens, once details are questioned and claims are tested, the image has nothing left protecting it. Bauer believes the next chapter will reveal even more, not because Meghan says anything new, but because fewer people are paying attention to it. If the truth matters to you, hit subscribe. There's a lot more coming out soon.